The September 4th, 2019 City Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin the meeting with a roll call.
Sure. Woods?
Here.
Briggs?
Here.
Commissioner Mills?
Here.
Commissioner Milstein?
Here?
Commissioner Gibb-Randall?
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé?
Here.
Commissioner Abons?
Here.
Sorry, Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Here.
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have any introductions this evening?
We do not.
All right, approval agenda. Do we have a commissioner that will move approval? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Woods. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Minutes of the previous meeting. Before us this evening, we have the August 20th, 2019 meeting minutes. Do we have a commissioner who will move? Moved by Commissioner Gibb-Randall, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Any discussion or changes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are approved. We move on to reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers and committees, and written communications and petitions. We'll begin with our City Council representative, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A handful of updates for you. City Council met last night and got out early this morning. On property-specific updates, the city executed its right to first refusal at the property of 1146 South Maple. Folks will remember this as adjacent to an Avalon development that we reviewed and passed on to City Council probably over a year ago at this point. But the city's purchase of this would enable Avalon to expand the opportunity of affordable housing on those two parcels now. 2857 Packard, also known as the Weber property, passed at first reading. This body also reviewed plans for an Ann Ashley parking structure build-out. That proposal was voted down at City Council. That was actually, there were some active and productive debate about the specifics, and staff's request was to vote it down and bring something fresh, just because it required a lot more number crunching. On zoning-related matters, two amendments to Chapter 55 passed at second reading. First was allowing restaurant, bar, and food service uses in our office district. The second were fixing some clerical errors in updating our UDC to reflect our former Chapter 55. Updates on the tree line trail. We were able to secure an easement at the Kingsley condominium property, which will allow for a potential stretch of the tree line trail to run through the near downtown area. And additionally, we are applying for a grant to the county to study the possible connections between 721 North Main, a city-owned property, and Argo Pond. Transportation updates of relevance to this body. City Council will be looking at the Lower Town Mobility Study, which would look at the region around the intersection of Plymouth, Traver, and Pontiac Trail. Two road reconfigurations, which were proposed road diets that would provide added amenities for cyclists and pedestrians. On Traverwood Drive on the northeast side of town, one proposal has been kind of cycling between versions, and we're soliciting more input from institutional stakeholders like the Islamic Center and a couple University of Michigan facilities in the area. The second on Green Road, also on the northeast side of town, failed at City Council. And finally, I will be leaving this body. I was not able to secure enough votes for reappointment. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve with you. I'm not sure exactly what the mayor's timeline is for nominating a replacement City Council representative, but no, this has been a distinct honor of my tenure on City Council. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll have more thoughts on that later in the meeting. Moving on to Planning Manager. Mr. Kowalski, do you have any report for us?
I do not have a report tonight. Thank you.
All right. Planning Commission officers and committees. Commissioner Briggs.
Just an update that the master plan consultants that have put in proposals, those interviews are going to be happening within the next couple of weeks. So that process is moving forward.
Great. Any other? All right. Written communications and petitions, I believe we received 2 letters that are in our packet. So please take a look at that. And now moving on to audience participation. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to an item that is not on our agenda, this is your opportunity to address the Planning Commission. So if you are here in regards to Hideaway Lane or Vic Phillips South, we'll have an opportunity for that in a little bit. But is there anyone in the audience who currently wishes to address the Planning Commission regarding an item that is not on our agenda this evening? If so, please step up to the podium. Seeing no one, I will move on to public hearings scheduled for our next business meeting, which we have none.
We do not have any.
So I'm not sure what will happen at that meeting, but we will most likely have a meeting.
Yes, we'll keep you posted on the details.
So now moving on to regular business. The first item is Hideaway Lane Plan Project Site Plan for City Council approval. And we will begin with the petitioner's presentation. The petitioner will have up to 10 minutes to address the Planning Commission, at which time we will then head over to staff to get an staff report, and then we'll open it up for public hearing before our discussion. So please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michael Powell. I'm the design engineer for this particular project. My address is 4700 Cornerstone Drive in White Lake. And if you don't hold it against me, I'm a U of M grad as well. So it's nice to be back in my hometown here. This project, unless you're much older than I am, has been around a long time. This particular project started in 1965, in which it was part of a planned development that far back. 9 of the original units were constructed and still exist on the site. Approximately 15 years ago, that was modified to a site condo status consisting of 18 single-family home sites. The construction started approximately 3 years ago, in which 3 of the basements were dug as part of that original approval. And as you can well imagine, the economy delayed it many, many years during the middle 2000s. This particular project, as you can see before you, has started out as a single-family home site. And as the developer started construction on it, he soon found that the construction cost and the sales prices for these homes would be much larger than what the area can really afford. So as part of an economical, efficient home sales and for rentals, he decided to approach the Planning Commission and staff to make these duplexes instead of single-family home sites, much more affordable home sites in the area. So as part of that, we've been working with staff for a couple, 3 years now to try to get this site to accommodate duplexes versus single-family home sites. So the proposal before you right now is for 17 individual buildings in virtually the same location of the original single-family home sites, and 1 single-family home site that's already finished on site, and to change those buildings into duplexes instead of single-family home sites. And as you can see, it's virtually a single-family home look with 2 doors in it instead of 1 door in the front of the structure. And each unit is going to have a 2-car garage, an enclosed 2-car garage. So all of the individual home sites will have their automobiles inside the structures, and then we'll have individual drives leading up to each of the home sites. So there are 2 driveways leading up to each of the home sites themselves. We have, as I said, we've worked very hard with staff, and I want to personally thank and tell you that Mr. Jeff Kahn and Amy are professionals in every sense of the word. They see problems with sites, they let us know about them ahead of time, and they work very carefully making sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's crazy that they hold us accountable to actually present a nice project to you planning commissioners. So the request now is to allow for a little more dense development in that the number of units are changing, but the number of structures are staying exactly the same. There are a couple items that I'd like to let the Planning Commission know, because in doing this kind of work around the state, not much changes in the concerns of the neighboring community and the planning commissions. Not the least of which, and I apologize as well in that I'm a crazy board member in White Lake Township, so I get to hear the concerns of development in my own community. So traffic is a major issue. And I have a revised traffic study, and I'm not exactly sure that that the revised traffic study is before you. I know one was submitted, but as the single-family home site with the 18 units that are proposed, ended up with 215 traffic incidences or traffic, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get there, the actual traffic count for single-family homes. When it was reevaluated by our professional traffic engineer, the difference between the traffic count in single-family home sites and multiple family units, the increase only raised by 16 traffic counts going from the single-family home site to the multiple family. The charts in AASHTO and the other traffic analysis show that that is because of the difference in the use of those homes. You don't have a family of 4, 5, and 6 in the home site. You don't have a number of trips back and forth to school. Typically, they're occupied by 1 and 2 member families and not larger families in the multiple. So a total of 16 additional trips only by changing from single family to multiple, and only 4 additional trips during peak times, morning and evening, so only 4 additional trips. So the concern from the neighbors are somewhat alleviated because of the different type of occupant that will be in the multiple family development. We have sanitary sewers already extended into the site from the previous project. Water main is already installed in the development, and the storm sewer system will be upgraded to accommodate all the roadways as they currently are, and they had to be modified meeting the fire department's requirements. Stormwater flows from the north side to the south side in a parallel storm sewer system, picking up the stormwater coming out of the site from the surrounding area, as well as down the streets. It goes into a forebay and a detention basin and outlets in a controlled way into the creek that follows along the westerly side of the development. Jeff, is there can you change that?
Oh,
should
if
be able to
if you have the
advance
keyboard
it
there, if you
on
hit the
that.
return,
The
return should advance it.
return or the enter?
Or enter, I guess it's called now.
Let's see. Oh, look at that.
There.
All right, so this shows the location. It's along the southerly side of Travers Drive. This is strictly a residential type roadway. This whole area is currently zone multiple, and there's a great deal of multiple already existing in this area. The picture along the bottom portion of that screen is really from the railroad tracks, the outlet underneath the railroad tracks, and the owner has stepped in and cleaned up all those gabion baskets and created a very nice and a very efficient manner to carry the water from underneath the railroad tracks down to the stream or creek to the west. So the current proposal, as I said, is to change the single-family homes to duplexes. We had to lose one of the duplex units because in working with the fire department, they needed to have a turnaround at the end for their fire trucks, and so we've accommodated a turnaround for the fire department, as well as in fighting the fires. If something were to happen back there, the southern half of the project will be sprinklered. All the homes in the southern portion of the development will be sprinklered, fire suppressed, so the fire department has, their hope is the fire will be out before they even arrive on site. So all of that was done to accommodate the fire department's concerns. We also had an interesting chore because, believe it or not, and I know you didn't have any hand in this at all, your ordinance have changed over the years. And so to allow this site to accommodate the balance of, or to new ordinances, we've had to accommodate it by widening the drives from the original site. And so we've widened the driveways at fire hydrants. We've, as I said, we've sprinklered the buildings. We've modified how each building was going to be served with sanitary and water. And so we've worked very carefully with staff to modify even the dumpster area and reconfigured that, and we're going to rebuild those walls around that. We have added bicycle racks on site. Most of the individual bicycle racks will be in the buildings, but we have a Class A bicycle rack out in front to where anybody can keep their bikes there as well. So I'll be available to answer any other questions you have. And just one other very quick note. Your notes say that the owner has requested that this be postponed. They didn't believe that they could have anyone here to represent them. So I'm here representing them, and if the Planning Commission so desires, and I've answered all your questions, and this goes properly, we would appreciate a recommendation to City Council tonight if it's your pleasure. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now head to Mr. Khan for a staff report.
Thank you. Just a little bit of history first. In the mid-'60s, a 9-unit townhome project was constructed on the site, which still exists today. In 2003, another developer received approval to construct the single-family homes on the site, but only one of those homes was constructed. Another home remains unfinished on the site, and 2 basements were constructed without any other improvements. The current development team acquired the property fairly recently and came up with this new concept of proposing duplexes where previously single-family home sites were shown. So that's a little bit of the history. I also want to point out that at that time, in the mid-2000s, when the initial development team was attempting to construct the homes, a number of natural features were removed at the site and are in the process of being replaced. There were 2 mitigated wetlands that were constructed at that time that are not in great shape, so we've asked the current developers to improve them, which they've agreed to do. There are 2 other wetlands on the site for a total of 4. The staff report does include a discussion on tree replacement, and the petitioner has agreed to provide all of the necessary replacement trees. The petitioner has also agreed to dedicate funds for park improvements nearby. And at this point, because the petitioner had requested postponement, staff is recommending that the site plan be postponed. If the Planning Commission has all of its questions answered and feel that this petition can move forward to City Council, then they can, then the Commission can move that.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up a public hearing on this item. If there's anybody in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission, please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. You'll have up to 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
My name is Patricia Hall. I live at 1790 Hideaway Lane, existing house, and I'd like to read the comments of my neighbor at 2000 Traver Road. And he says, "I am opposed to this project for several reasons. The developers have not demonstrated themselves to be responsible nor respectful neighbors. Currently, there is one house half constructed on the lot and 2 open foundations. These foundations have been open without any safety precautions, such as a fence or a rail, for over 3 years. I've expressed my concern regarding the safety of these open foundations in our neighborhood with children and pets, but have received no response. The developers turned our once beautiful backyard with trees and a picnic area into an unkempt wetland that they refused to maintain. When I expressed concern regarding this area, specifically the amount of standing water and subsequent mosquitoes, they told me I should get used to it, as that is how the land will remain. 3, our association of 9 condos in one house is already experienced problems with parking. Increasing the total number of dwellings from 29 to 45 would put undue stress on our already stretched parking. The developers have stated they plan to add garages to the units, but as the partially constructed house demonstrates, only 1 unit within these proposed duplex developments would have access to a garage. And finally, an increase in the number of total dwellings would lead to traffic problems, something I'm also concerned about, as there's currently only 1 driveway from Traver Road with access to the development. As stated by a member of the previous planning commission with these developers, an increase in construction equipment poses a safety risk to the children in the neighborhood. The developers stated they shared this concern and would meet with parents to ensure safety. Such a meeting never took place, and no measures to ensure the safety of the neighborhood children were taken. What will be the difference this time? Thank you for your time and consideration. Zachary Huttinger. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Favor. I live at 1791 Hideaway Lane. And regarding the existing structure, the partially built house, it is, as far as we can tell, only framed out. There's no drywall inside. It's not ready to move in. The windows are periodically open to the elements for weeks at a time during rain and snow. And the 2 open foundations a couple of months ago were modified to presumably accommodate the proposed duplexes. They had cinder block walls inserted, and in the process of this, the foundations themselves were damaged. So we have concerns about the quality of the buildings that are going to be going in on the existing pieces.
Thank you.
Seems like we have a good representation from Hideaway Lane. I am Craig Wagner at 1793 Hideaway Lane. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, and I appreciate this forum for you to listen to us. And I urge you not to approve the new proposal. 3 primary reasons, 2 specific to the site, and 1 larger from a development perspective in Ann Arbor. We've talked a little bit about traffic, that is number 1. With 16 new dwellings on the site, that will double the number of cars on that site. And if we're assuming that there will be between 1 and 2 cars for each of the dwellings, that's 16 to 32 cars additionally that can be coming and going. And whereas 16 to 32 cars in Ann Arbor, that's a drop in the bucket. Obviously, you have many decisions on expanded development, but certainly in that area where there's only 1 paved road out to greater Ann Arbor, we're going to certainly see greater traffic there. One of the things I was interested in seeing was the new site proposal, and this goes to my point number 2, and that is green space. As I expected, to keep the number of dwellings and double the number of or keep the number of buildings but double the number of dwellings, the dwellings have to be bigger. And certainly comparing the 2 before and after, The dwellings are much larger, and you can, I think, take a look. You know, me eyeballing it from 50 feet, it looks like 40% greater square footage on the buildings, and also less green space. I'm guessing it looks like if you look at all the green space on that 4 acres, I'm guessing it's about cut in half, but, you know, you certainly can make that calculation from the site plan. And lastly, I'd like to speak to this in the larger Ann Arbor perspective, because I know you have an interest in managing the new development that comes into the city. And it's hard to argue with the fact that, you know, more housing brings in more tax revenues, brings more people in to our fair cities, which is wonderful. But there's also a lot of hidden costs that we often don't consider. That is in terms of increased traffic, greater stress on the city infrastructure, reduction in green space, greater noise and light pollution, and more crowding on our streets. And these all contribute in a minor way to degrading the character of the city that we love. And this is especially true given that we're in the unique position of having a wonderful university that also is putting significant pressure on. Is that it? So I urge you not to approve the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just put this here. Okay, so I'm going to read off my iPhone just to keep my comments efficient. My name is Joseph Pratt. I live part-time at 1790 Hideaway Lane, and then the other part of the time at 3092 Wolverine Drive over in Colonial Square. I want to comment on what I observe as the responsibility or irresponsibility of the developers. You've heard comments about the open foundations, this derelict house they've been working on off and on for 4 years that is trashed by the weather. It's sometimes left open. There's all kinds of people living in there, and animals too sometimes. So it kind of concerns me that this kind of irresponsibility is going on, and now they're proposing this development. And my biggest question is the drainage. Okay, the city spent millions of dollars developing the drainage on Leslie Golf Course a few years ago. And it seems to me that you'd want to preserve that investment. Well, this area that the proposed Hideaway Lane development is going in on is soggy all the time. Clearly has drainage problems. When we have one of these hard rainstorms, the ground can be soggy for several days. My question is, build this thing, and where's all that water going to go? You've heard about the empty foundations, the derelict house. The city has spent millions of dollars on the watershed, developing a watershed for Leslie Park Golf Course. Why do you want to screw that up? I'm concerned that this Hideaway Lane development is potentially alter the water dynamics of the area. It is not fair to the taxpayers, and especially those who own structures in the area that could be potentially negatively affected, by the water backups. Currently, the water does not drain easily. After a heavy rain, the area is often soggy for several days. With the build of the development, I fear that there will not be a good way for the water to drain. The site has considerable marshland area. Will it be fair to build houses on an area that will cause problems for the buyers of those units? Additionally, those of us who live nearby could also encounter drainage problems. That is not fair if a problem occurs. And you don't know if a problem occurs. Mr. Powell is saying, oh yeah, we better figure it out. But he told me just a few minutes ago, well, this is a tough area. So, I'm kind of guessing they're not sure what's going to happen. So my concern is if there is a problem, it's going to seem like too little too late, because you're going to come in, they're going to come in, oh yeah, we're going to fix this, going to tweak that. And I think it's just a wet area. So anyway, that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the planning commission in regards to this petition? Seeing no one, I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Hideaway Lane Plan, Project Site Plan, and Development Agreement. Do I have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Ackerman. And we are in discussion. Before I hand it off to somebody, so for as long as we've had the packet, which was since last week, there's been a staff recommendation for postponement and the developers or petitioners' request for a postponement. So my fear in having a deep discussion this evening is that we aren't actually getting the full public comment on this item. So I will, of course, I'll listen to what everybody has to say, but I do encourage this body to vote for a postponement so that we could gather additional feedback. And I will hand it off to Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a list of 8 things I wanted to check in on, but I do appreciate, I don't know if more neighbors would come. I don't know if neighbors were deterred by the recommendation for postponement. And so I also hear the benefit of postponing now and getting, their input. So I guess I'll hold off and see if that's of interest now. If we are to postpone, I do want to just ask one thing of the developer. So I guess get a sense of the room.
Take a quick poll. Are we okay
allowed to
with
take a poll?
having a light discussion and then moving on to postponement?
As a point of order, I don't know if we can take a poll.
I didn't prepare in the way that I normally would because I saw this was being postponed, and this has got a lot of complexity to it, so I would really like to postpone. However, I do think that bringing up a few items that they can then address the next time around would be great. So if there's a few kind of bullet list type things that we can give to the developer, I'm totally in favor of that, but I personally don't feel ready to review this because I just didn't do my normal due diligence on it because I saw it was recommended to postpone.
Okay. So Commissioner Ackerman, let's start with the list.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. With respect to the fencing, I understand you didn't acquire the property that long ago, and it sounds like there's been a sordid history of different property owners. I appreciate that. It's your responsibility now, and so while this is before this body, if you could take back to the owner to get this fenced off while this is going through process, I think it would mean a lot to the neighbors and certainly a lot to City Hall. So if there could be some kind of protective fencing while it's going through process, I think that would be good.
You're talking about around the open basement.
Exactly.
Yes, thank you.
So at the very least, some change there would be great immediately. And then in terms of the other items that I wanted to touch on, with respect to stormwater, there isn't a lot in our staff report. Getting some comprehensive information about what the effects of this development will be on the movement of water and what you're doing to mitigate that would be helpful. Information on the changes in trip generation from a traffic perspective. Mentioned 16 increased trips, but didn't mention the unit or during what time span of the day. On parking, I did hear the residents, although it seems like this site is overparked with 3 parking spaces per unit, which is a fair amount. On the building quality, I'll probably want to look to staff on assurances that our permitting process and inspection process is going to ensure that anything built in the city of Ann Arbor is safe and secure for its residents. On the size of the buildings and the changes to green space, it would be great to get a comparison, not just visually, but in terms of dimensions of any changes to the building envelopes as well, and the impacts to green space.
Commissioner Briggs.
That touched on most of the concerns that I had as well. The only other one that I would suggest that it sounds like there is opportunity for another or a public engagement meeting. It sounds like there is a request from folks in the neighborhood who are existing there to deal with what construction is going to look like and meeting requests that have not necessarily been fulfilled. So it'd be nice to see that is moving forward and some citizen input and kind of neighborhood input is happening.
Appreciate that.
productively. And I would be interested to hear a little bit more on just that structural integrity of the houses that got raised a few times. Could speak to how the city sort of addresses issues like that may sort
We
of
can
be.
Of course, I don't know specifically
Yeah,
in
it
this
sounds like
case.
that some of those things might be
But
hidden
that
by the
would
time
absolutely
they
be
get built.
something that the building officials can follow up on. I assume Jeff will take note of that. I'm not aware of that history offhand, but yeah, if they're dangerous and falling in, then that's something we need to know about. And they'll also be inspected before the project would be allowed to go forward, if it was approved in any way, shape, or form. Before anything starts construction on that foundation, it will be inspected, especially because of the length of time it's been in the ground.
Commissioner Mills?
I think when we get the staff report next time too, kind of understanding a little bit more about the necessity for the plan project modification. And I assume that when when the petitioner talked about changes that happened in zoning since then, that was what was being referred to potentially. But kind of understanding a little bit better where that is, and how that came to be. Where it is that it's closer to it sounds like the east property line than allowed by code, how that came to be. I'll just assert that particularly since we're moving to duplexes now, and the requirement is 30 and it's asking for 20. Yes, there is a bigger setback on the other side. Like, there's lots of other things that can be part of a planned project that helps meet that qualification, and so I think we should be considering that, like knowing what is on that list.
Commissioner Woods?
Just a question about the easement in the back, which the rear setback is going to abut the railroad track. So I'd like to see how that's going to be fenced and how you're going to keep children and others safe if indeed that's going to be pretty close to folks' property.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move to postpone, but also just to be in compliance with our ethics rules. I said it would mean a lot to City Hall and the neighbors to get fencing. I can't speak for City Hall. It would mean a lot to this planning commissioner and member of City Council. I'll move to postpone this till our next meeting.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Mills, seconded. Any further discussion on the postponement? Commissioner Woods?
Did you want to postpone it to a date certain? You said July 19th?
Our
What did-
next
I-
meeting is what I
I
said.
think we asked a lot of questions, so I'm going to leave. I think it would be best to let
Fair
Mr. Khan and
Right.
the
That would have been my
petitioner.
suggestion. I
Yeah.
just couldn't hear what you said.
Oh, I said the next meeting, but that makes more sense.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right,
So a date, my motion, if I could, friendly amendment to a date uncertain.
okay.
All right. Further discussion on the postponement? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? It is postponed.
Thank you, commissioners, very much.
Thank you. Moving on to Vic Village South site plan for city council approval. And we will begin with
Who's doing the
the
presentation?
petitioner's presentation. They will have up to 10 minutes to present their project. We will then open it up then we'll go to a staff report,
So what do we need to do, Matt?
followed by a public hearing, and then discussion.
Okay. Hold on one second. You told me to hit escape. I'm not,
Yeah,
I
well,
hit
you're getting
escape.
there.
You didn't tell me anything after that.
Well, that's true. That's why I said I did.
You didn't tell me to go that far.
These are just going to be the general plans, so you're going to have to kind of scroll through it. I'm not sure where you want to start, but.
start at the end.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Full screen mode.
Oh, down here. Hold right here. Every one of these is a little different sometimes with programs. Good evening, my name is Sean Avera. I'm with Hughes Properties. We're the developer of Vic Village South. I have Ron Hughes with us today as well, who's one of the principals at Hughes Properties. We have Tom Dillenbeck with Hobbs and Black, Diane McIntyre with Hobbs and Black, who are architects, and Tom Covert and Ted Hirsch with MCI, who are our civil engineers. We are proposing today a 13-story apartment complex located at the corner of East University and South University. We have gone through the design review board. We've implemented a lot of the changes that the design review board came back to us with, primarily as it related to this corner. We have also worked very diligently with all of the various departments within the city, and have addressed all of their concerns, I believe, to the best of our ability and what they were looking for as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Diane to answer, to do the rest of the presentation, then we'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Commission members. As Sean mentioned, Diane McIntyre with Hobbs & Black Architect. I wanted to walk you through an overview of the Vic Village South project. As Sean mentioned, we're on South University Avenue, and we are between East University and Church Street, taking pretty much the whole block with the exception of existing restaurant establishment, Good Time Charlie's, which would stay at the northeast corner of the site, is not included in this property. We are 13 stories of primarily student housing, and as you can see from the rendering, primarily a brick building with metal panel accents and stone accents as well. We have 2 levels of underground parking proposed for a total of about 71 off-street spaces that would be for resident use only. And I'm going to see how fast this will scroll through. It's bringing us to our lower level plans of parking. And then up to the first floor where you can see a bit more of the site and how it fronts on South University Avenue at the top of the screen, and then connects actually between East University and Church Street at the southern portion of the site. And that alley would actually be creating a pedestrian walkway between those 2 streets. The first floor consists mainly of retail, commercial tenant spaces, and then you can also see the parking ramp to the below-grade parking off of East University Avenue. The building consists of about 133 living units. We're focused primarily on 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units for this project. No 5 or 6 bedroom units are proposed at this time. And we're also incorporating affordable housing into this development as well. Amenity spaces are gathered mostly on the 2nd floor, and then as you move up to the building, the 13th floor, getting used to this mouse, would provide amenity spaces for the residents and an amenity patio as well, overlooking the University of Michigan Diag. Roof plan. And looking at the north facade of the building, which is right on South University Avenue, the main residential entrance, somewhat centered on the building, and distinguishing itself with the use of different materials, cast stone and stone framing the residential entrance. Different modules of retail and commercial spaces along the first floor, and then the northwest corner of the building actually having a recess at the first 2 floors, and then bringing down a structural column element at the bottom of the 12-story glass tower, and looking to incorporate kind of a visual graphic to help define the area. In this case, it is a V logo for Vic Village South. As you know, Vic Village North is just open just across the street. As we move to the south elevation along the alley, and then the west elevation at East University Avenue, additional retail, commercial spaces, entrance to the parking garage. And then along Church Street, there's also a retail element connecting with the existing restaurant establishment, which would be Good Time Charlie's, and then the Pizza House establishment, trying to make a connection as well with retail and commercial establishments. section of the building shows the building height to be 150 feet total. That's to the top of the mechanical equipment screen. The building itself would be more around 140, 141 feet. Again, 2 levels of underground parking facilities. And that brings us back to the original rendering, showing the massing, articulation, and materials. And thank you.
Thank you. And we will head to Mr. Kowalski for a staff report.
Thank you. Thank you. I really don't have too much to add. There's not a lot of complexity to the site. I can just say this was a project that's been in the works for a while, discussions with planning staff, including with the DDA as well, coordinating the streetscape improvements, which you all know which have been ongoing for a year or so right now. So those discussions have begun quite a while ago, so those details are essentially all flushed out. Really, the only thing else to add that's a little unique about this project, it's the first project that we've seen that is utilizing the affordable housing premium. So that will be regulated in the same way as our other affordable housing programs. It's a deed restriction for the life of the project. Those, I believe it's 14 units that would need to be affordable for the life of the project. There are no natural features on the site. I mean, there's one landmark tree actually, which is in the right-of-way, and that will have to be removed for the project and will be replaced with various other trees through the right-of-way and through tree mitigation payments. So that really summarizes it up, and staff is recommending approval at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this item. If there's anybody in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item, please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
See if I can reach this. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Ethel Potts, 1939 Jackson Road. And I'm remembering back to the Calthorpe report. The city spent a lot of money for a major study and planning report by the firm of Calthorpe. And in that, on Southview in particular, there we had pictures. The pictures were of a street with trees and retail along and rather low buildings. Is this building intended to fill any particular needs of Ann Arbor people? Or is just the wishes of the land seller and the developer that are being considered here? Does it fill any of our needs? The downtown D1 and D2 zoning plans, as in the UDC, the Unified Development Code, states that the land use and standards for Southview states them. It is the official adopted downtown character area overlay. Quote, let me quote the overlay, the character area overlay. The intent and standards of this overlay district are a mix of building types and sizes. Retail first on the first level should continue to reflect narrow lots with small scale widths and heights. Any tall of the building should be at the center of the block, not up to the street. Retain a variety of old small-scale retail and residential. Minimize impacts on nearby residential streets. This is the end of the quotes from your own city code. Will the commission discuss the overlay district? In the past, the commission has not. I've attended your meetings where you've done downtown buildings that have an overlay character area, and nothing was ever said by commission about this. Is the staff report say anything about the character area overlays? I don't think so. At what point are we going to deal with them? They're in your city code. They're the law, the local law. At the time of writing and adopting the D1 and D2 zonings, the public was assured that the character overlays would protect existing small-scale residential and retail buildings. That was the purpose of it, is to let Ann Arbor continue to be Ann Arbor. Will you be discussing that tonight? I hope so. Will you state your reasons for your vote? And will your reasons for your vote be in the minutes also? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the planning commission in regards to this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Vic Village South site plan and development agreement subject to combining the lots prior to issuance of any permits. Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Hammerschmidt. We are in discussion. Commissioner Briggs.
So I forgot my computer at home, so I don't have all my notes, but I'll try to go off of memory. So a few things that I remember I wanted to follow up on. I noticed in the report regarding the public meeting report, one of the questions was about sidewalks and the width of them around the building, and it was I think between 3 and 5 feet for the sidewalks, was the response.
I think that's referring more towards the back side of the property, because the ones along the streets are dictated. We don't have control of those.
Okay, that,
Yeah, so that question was primarily, how does that pedestrian pathway work if I'm coming from East University over to Church Street? So, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but from East U to the middle of the building, you have a 5-foot walk, and then if you go through the portion of the building that's on the north side, that's a 3-foot walk, which most people aren't probably gonna use that. But if you go to the south side of the building,
can you,
I'm gonna
show me
bring
where
up-
you're
yep,
talking about where the
yep.
3-foot walk might be? 'Cause that
Yep.
was,
So this section here is 5 feet. As you come across here, then you have an option. You can either continue to go back through this portion right here. That portion's only 3 feet, but then if you come back over this sidewalk, the civil shows it better than this plan, but there's a walk here. That walk is 4 feet, Tom? Yes, 4 feet there. So you have a varying between 5 and 3 feet as they walk through the mid-block of the building.
okay, okay.
Yep. The other ones are all dictated by city ordinance and everything
That made sense.
We are putting back like for like or making bigger.
How could it possibly be 3 feet along? Serious concerns. if that's
Yeah,
the
it's a little
case.
confusing if you just
All
read
right,
that.
and then with regards to the bicycle parking, I saw that there's 4 Class C, which if I'm correct, from the Google Street Map, it looked like there were existing bike parking maybe outside on Church Street as is. Is that the 4 Class C? Or 2
No,
Class
the
C?
four
Where are
Class C
the-
would be right here.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
So it does not include the parking within the right-of-way.
Okay.
That parking will be replaced
So
through
this is-
as the DDA.
okay, so this is
Yeah,
new
we
and
will
it's-
replace like for like on the
Yes.
north side, so all the bike hoops, everything that is currently there as part of the streetscape plans, we will be responsible for putting back after we do construction, just as what we did on the north project, which we're doing right now.
Okay, and I had a call into the DDA about this, but didn't get a chance they didn't get a chance to give me a call back. I'm sure you've talked more extensively with them around potentially bicycle parking. I was surprised it sounds like there's a lot of bicycle parking inside on the first floor, and I'd love to hear about that in a second. But given the density of this building and the population that it's serving, which is student population, it seems surprising, there's not actually that much bicycle parking out front where people would want to use it during the fair weather months. And I'm curious how you would anticipate.
We don't control, obviously, that's dictated by the DDA and their streetscape plan. So the number of bike hoops and everything that have been there were part of the approval of when that went through, whatever the process was with the city. So that isn't anything that we control. We can only control what's in the building and on site.
And I can just add to that, it
Yeah.
is part, I was not directly involved through the DDA, but it was a source of many discussions, how much bicycle parking you put in the right-of-way. You know, there's trade-offs, too much, it gets congested. So it is a DDA, Sean's correct, it is a
Yeah.
DDA decision, but it has been thought through.
Yeah.
I can't respond to all the specifics of it, but
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a question.
It's a
to
good
follow
question.
up with them
There's a
around
lot
the
of trees
bicycle
there
corrals
they'll
that are
probably
being
hook up to.
used.
It's a
I mean,
good question.
It's more of the on-street parking that probably could be removed to use for bike corrals in that place.
That, exactly, and that's a whole nother.
So, and then there was a question, I had another question around, it looks like there's one public parking space, on-street parking space that's being removed for this at the cost of $87,000. Could you talk a little, that looks like that's a one-time cost?
It is.
Yes.
So with the DDA, I think, Matt, it's like 75,000 or something.
Yeah, it'll be.
To remove that
agreement.
parking space. And so what that stemmed from was a number of these conversations, like Matt had said, that we had between the DDA, engineering, and traffic of, well, where do you put the ramp into the building? And it was determined between all of those, our consultant as well, that coming off of East U was the preferred location to have that. And so as a result of that, we obviously have to reduce one parking space because of, distance that you have to have to South University, but also too, one of the comments that came back from both DDA and I think engineering maybe was, we are actually being required on that corner there to actually bump that corner actually further out than what it currently is right now.
Okay. And I know this is not in our regulation, so it's not really something that, I know it came up in sort of the public questions that you received, but we don't in terms of Lyft and Uber, we're not requiring that for large developments right now to provide that space. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I think we should be putting that onto our work plan at some point. We can't have developments of this type and say, oh, well, we'll just suggest that they park over on the side. We know that's not going to happen. I mean, this is really becoming a problem in our downtown.
I think the challenge you have just
Yeah.
is how do you do that on an urban site? In that it's something that I think is a bigger overreaching than just saying to a developer it needs to be done, obviously. I know there have been conversations at one point in time with like the various loading zones that are both on East University and Church Street of, hey, in the evening time, we're gonna make those the Uber and the Lyft areas, or we're gonna make them the Amazon area. Those are big, obviously big questions, because I can't tell you, we get hundreds of packages every day right now into our building, so it obviously is an issue between UPS, FedEx, Amazon, all of these of how do you handle an urban area.
Yeah, probably the Amazon is bigger. Then, can you talk about how that front entrance has evolved since the design was initially proposed?
So our,
Yeah, it's easier to go this way, I think.
during our initial design review board process, we had a totally different design at the northwest corner. It was recessed, somewhat like it's shown now, but only at the first floor and part of the second floor, and did not have anything really, I think, grounding it or making it stand out. So for our second round of design review board, we took a totally different approach and really took out any recesses at this and brought the whole building down. But again, I think the concern was that it did not stand out or did not have enough character. And there was some concern about, if you wanted to say, meet me at the clock tower or something, or meet me at, in this case, the V, where we're taking a recess out of both first and second floor and then bringing down a dominant feature to help anchor the spot at that really lively, active corner.
At one point in time, even the facades were a little bit different on the second floor, and so we took back those comments of like she said, one of the big things was what's the identifying feature so I can tell somebody, meet me at this location, and that's what we came back with, so.
So this is after the second sort of round of design review?
Correct, yep.
So I don't know if this is going to evolve anymore, and I know that you don't have to take our recommendations, but this is kitty corner to the Diag, right? One of the most iconic entrances, one of the most iconic spots in our city, I would say. And what I'm looking at from the initial pictures is you sort of look across and see a big column with a V on it. And, you know,
There's
that's
also
not, that's not necessarily, that's not a reason we cannot approve the building. I just think it's a really wasted opportunity for your building.
There are
to-
also some things there that you can't really see, but we're doing some nice light features at the front to really liven and brighten up that area.
I'm sure there's some things I can't see, but the things that I
Yep.
can see, this building is going to be around for a long time. This is the character of South U, this is what people are seeing. And there's some opportunity here to really, I think, push this a little bit further to make this something that is beautiful coming out of the diag. I mean, you're coming out of one of those beautiful spots of our town. And, you know, the building itself is what we're sort of used to seeing in terms of student high-rises, and I think, you know, much of it is fine. But I do think that entranceway could use a little bit of emphasis to make that something that is memorable for our community.
And I
If-
think the challenge you have, and
In
it's
a
part of the
positive.
reason why you go through the design review board, is everybody's going to have their own slight take on what does that mean. Because we can make another change and you may like it, but you may not like it, and, you know, that's not going far enough. So that's the challenging aspect that we have at that aspect, so.
I certainly recognize that to be true, but it's something that came up at both design review meetings, and after the second one, there was still an emphasis to push on this area, and so we're the next body to see that after it. And I'm sure that if you ask each one of us, there will be slightly different reactions to this. However, I'll be curious to hear what others say, but I do think that is something that could use an additional emphasis and would be worth it for the community to see that. Could you talk a little bit about the affordable housing? Just, this is the first time we've seen something like that come here, and what, we've had questions about how that, what that looks like in terms internally managing.
So I can't specifically address how that is how it's handled from a management standpoint. So our operator who we're utilizing on the North project is Asset Living. They're the largest third-party operator of student housing multifamily in the U.S. And so we had actually a lot of conversations with them. They're like, yes, we have a variety of different projects at different locations that do this type of thing, because it is becoming more common to incorporate affordable housing into developments and everything else. So I don't have the specifics of how that is, but our manager does have that experience of how they handle that aspect.
I wonder, I'm sure that staff has thought about this. If I remember correctly, it's 80% of AMI?
Yes.
It was the
Yep.
number. And so considering this is a building that serves a student population, and that is a population that often is under the poverty line anyway, I'm curious what that looks like in terms of providing these premiums and how we consider that as a city.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. When they're registered as affordable units through the county's program, then the county they will have to take from that to fill these affordable units. So, but you're right, I mean, we can't discriminate student or non-student to who gets on that list. So yes, it is possible that students could get on that list.
So it's
But I mean, they'd have to already be on that list. They're
On
not
the
just gonna
count-
have
they're-
like students walking in off the street saying, you know.
okay, so they're coming through the county.
Exactly, they're
okay.
gonna have to be through the program, it's gonna be managed in a similar way as our other affordable housing programs. But yes, you're correct, I mean, that's an issue that we may struggle with, the occupant.
That's it for now. Thanks.
Commissioner Woods.
I feel like a teeter-totter.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. So just a few more questions about that northwest corner. Can you tell us what one would see, looking at it from across the street, on the interior of the building? I mean, I think the design review board said something like maybe a large chandelier or something like that. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
thinking about public art or what you're planning for that, but.
So obviously, we haven't fully vetted out the whole lighting scheme, but we do have some lights up there in regards to that. there are conversations that we can have, obviously, with an artist of doing something on that column as well. So there's a lot of flexibility we have there. I don't want to say we have all those answers just right at this moment of what exactly we're going to do there. I know one of the conversations, I'm kind of jumping, but it ties back in, is when you look at the back area of how do you make that pedestrian friendly, you know, we're doing a lot of lighting. We're going to talk with, you know, an artist on one of the walls of making a mural like you see in a lot of the downtown areas. We actually have the building where Night Steakhouse is downtown, and we did a mural there at that alleyway. So there are those types of things that we will look at there, and look at that in this area as well. So what also happens here too, though, is the first floor tenant here does have this doesn't go all the way out, all the way to the property line. So it sits further back, so it creates an outdoor area for them to be able to utilize seating, or people to come in and do seating as well, while still walking through and being able to see across corner to corner there. It's not like you come and there's a column right there. Let me go to the first floor plate.
Does that column have to be made out of cement?
It's an actual structural column, correct?
There's a concrete column within the column enclosure, but the enclosure is intended to be more of a stone material, like maybe a granite base and a cast stone.
So this kind of shows that we create a little bit of a railing here around this, so that it still creates a pedestrian area where pedestrians can be underneath the building as well. It creates an area in here the tenants can utilize to have some seating as well.
Okay. So that's just for the retail tenant, whatever that business is right there.
Yep.
To come in and out of that entrance.
Yep.
So do you have any sense yet as to whether or not some of the current businesses along that street are going to be able to be part of your
Well,
mix?
most of the businesses that are there have been relocated. So PNC Bank, which is there, is actually moving across into the north, Collision North project, or Vic Village North project. Underground Printing is moving across into Vic Village North as well. Oasis Pizza, Oasis Restaurant is moving actually where the old China Gate restaurant used to be at. So there are a lot of those that have relocated already within the block area. So it does leave a lot open there. We've had some interest from other businesses in the area to look at that. We haven't gotten any further in there obviously yet with them, but there has been some discussion with other businesses on that area.
Okay. And so you own this property and then the one right across the street from it?
Yeah,
So it's V North and V South?
Yep, Vic Village North, Vic Village South.
So has there been any discussion about some sort of a walkway between your two properties? And overhead?
No, that's way too costly to do. Trust me, we thought about it, but.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Commissioner Gabrandel.
When I was looking from the street level at the existing conditions, there's, I think, like 7 businesses all along South University there. And if you zoom out a little bit from the screen. that you're
Oh,
in,
sorry, yeah.
You're in the right slide, but yeah. So now it's becoming 3. And I think part of the character of that area is that it's kind of cheek to jowl with a whole bunch of little funky little businesses, and that's part of the appeal, and I think that's part of the character overlay kind of intent with some of that. And I'm just wondering how flexible these spaces could be to be able to accommodate any kind of future hole-in-the-wall spot that is just, you know, I don't know, that retains some of that.
There's always a challenge with that, of how do you do that and create something that's still leasable from a space. And so obviously with the other aspects that you have to put in there with a vestibule, that you go to like over a tenant D space, trying to break that up, still give them access to a back service corridor. Those are the types of challenges that become rather challenging, and trying to break these into multiple little ones is how do you then service the back of house, but also have the rentable square footage that's needed in order to support that. I'm not saying that they can't get split, but it also is market driven by who are the retail tenants that want to go in there. You see a lot more, obviously a lot of restaurants come into the downtown area. They require a larger square footage than somebody else does, or you may have a coffee shop, even coffee shops, some of the coffee shops we have sizable square footage as well. So it is a challenge, and the greatest challenge is how do you make the building circulation work with everything else that you have to have on the first floor, so.
I guess I would just request some flexibility to be able to retain some of that if possible. I know with some other properties that we've had, I'm just thinking of the kind of Lower Town one that we did where it was a little, they weren't quite sure whether it was going to be, you know, commercial or residential, and they were building things to be able to build flexibility into things. And so I would just put that forth, that part of the feeling of that place is that I understand there's design challenges, and I understand that that there's current code that you have to follow, which is different than when it was built a long time ago, and, but that is part of the change, I think, is that feeling of that you're, every 20 feet, you're passing something different. You know, that is not a big monolithic retail experience there that feels much more kind of sleek and standard. And maybe this is just the changing nature of how this area is going to evolve. I'm kind of tickled that you still have Good Time Charlie's on the corner, even though I think you guys probably hate it. I like it that it's kind of tucked in there and that there's these little remnants of, you know, these older buildings that are still within there, the holdouts, to kind of remind us of, you know, what the character has been for a long time. So, again, not a lot that we can legislate at this point with that, but I guess I would ask you to keep an open mind about
And we
some of
always
that.
do. I mean, if we have always looked at buildings and changed things up, you know, even on the North project, we had one tenant wanted to take all of it, then nope, they didn't, and we had a littler space. And so you try to work with how things ebb and flow with who comes in and who's interested too.
And I guess I have a larger global question. You all have done quite a few developments now in this area.
Mhm.
And what do you feel like are lessons learned for you? What is different about this building? What do you feel like is evolved in terms of your approach? I mean, the first one was way down on South Forest. That looks pretty different, so.
Yeah, that's a lot different down there.
Tell us, like, what you feel like, how you've evolved, like, as what you're learning, what you feel, what's different about this one?
So part of the evolution with this one is, and part of the reason why we have the, you know, the Vic Village name and to create like a village in that area, because we do have multiple properties in that we eventually will, you know, redevelop. With this one, what you see is not, you don't have 5 and 6 bedrooms, so it's to complement the adjacent building next door. As we look at the amenity areas, we're complementing the two different properties in regards to the tenants being able to utilize either side of the project. So if I have a fitness on demand and a full type of fitness room over on North, here we're using more of a CrossFit type environment. It's a different type of theme. We're putting more of a game room like Xbox, PlayStations. That's the newer thing nowadays. So you evolve obviously as you see the market, and obviously this is obviously a student-driven project, obviously. So those are some of the things we've looked at there and complementing each other with those buildings so that the projects complement. You look at the different materials, and that is partly obviously is what's been driven by this body and by City Council in regards to how do you modulate it, how do you change materials. And so in this building, you see a lot more glass on this one. I think we have the same amount of brick tones, like number of brick tones, but different how we apply those as well. But every site's unique. It's challenging. Everyone's got its own unique challenges, and you try to apply what you've learned in the other ones and bringing them forward and what you see the industry is looking at. So,
do you see this as? I guess I'm thinking of what Ms. Potts brought up, and just thinking about the character of the place and everything. Is the plan to just pretty much take over the entire area? I mean, it's like, it kind of makes me, I know, again, we're reviewing this, but what is exactly the process of where is the overlay district? How does that really play in terms of the review process with the staff? I mean, because they're all in there, there's all the descriptions in there, and you're supposed to follow them and everything, but clearly, this one really is pretty different than what's going in. And so I'm just curious, like, what, you know, how does that get weighted in all of this? Like, you just kind of hope that you have a couple of holdouts and that you have a few 3- and 4-story buildings that are left in there? Or like, what happens, really?
Well,
I'm just curious.
well, I mean, you know, we can't stop
Right.
the evolution, but, I mean, there are, like you said, there's obviously the character overlay. This project and any future projects will fall within those character overlay guidelines, but they don't necessarily, it can't, they regulate, and if you can see in the comparison chart, but there's only so many things they regulate, like setbacks, you know, massing, and, I can't think of some of the other terms offhand, like the massing articulation, the front setbacks, the offsets at the street walls, but those kind of are street wall, so push it back and things like
Right.
that. But we don't delineate, how am I supposed to say, like store frontage exactly.
Sure.
Like you said, the previous one, they're a mix of various sizes. I mean, some of them are barely 10 feet wide, it
Right.
seems. But the character overlays don't really address that. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't. I mean, there's language in there that says these are the kind of things that we want to look to help preserve, and we'll use that in some of our analysis in looking at this. And the design review board used some of that in pushing back from some of their initial elevations and using that. So we do look at it, we do use it, and the things where there are definitive numbers, you know, those, it meets it. But it's really hard, and I remember the discussions very well over, do we regulate building widths and things like that to keep these smaller, you know, things. But I mean, the fact is, it is true, many of those now don't meet building codes or planning
Right,
codes, so you
right.
couldn't recreate those
That's
spaces.
right.
So it is a challenge, but we kind of work in there, and we can work with what's brought to us and try and form it in the best way we can to get it to you guys and eventually up even higher. So I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but if this, you know, there's nothing stopping from redeveloping within the limits of the code,
Right.
the rest of the block,
Right.
or anybody else.
Yeah, and
So-
so in other words, in terms of that character overlay, really, like this whole kind of 4-block area or whatever it is that gets covered could truly be all of these size buildings, and that's pretty much what, because, so the character overlay really doesn't,
Well, it
There's-
does. I mean, I think it does some articulation. I think it does help, but it's not getting you, I think, what you want exactly with the smaller type.
and I don't think it all has to stay the way that it is, I'm not saying that, but it does, they are variations on a theme, you know, the new ones that are there, you know, and part of that is our code, you know, in terms of what we're asking for, and we don't have form-based code either, so that's part of how we've structured our system, too. So I guess I'm just putting it out there into the world for us to ponder some more. I guess I would just say that.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Thank you. Maybe I'll start, kind of continue that conversation, then go to some other details. So when looking at that character overlay district, I would say in terms of small commercial, when I review this, we're looking at 2,500 square feet as kind of the max and 1,500 square feet as the min. I think one of my preferred favorite unit is tenant E, as it's just got the corridor in between both sides, like it wedges in there as its own kind of isolated piece versus B and D, which looking at it, there are ways to slice those up into segments and tie into those corridors if necessary. I've seen and done it before, so you can have D1 and D2 and B1 and B2 for those tenants, so I feel like there is that possibility if necessary. But the small scale, when working on spaces like this, is almost relative. Like modern building code with accessibility and egress demands requires more square footage within uses for that. And so the kind of original 1,000 square foot, small hole in the wall is actually not very feasible to meet all of those building requirements. And so creating them actually doesn't offer the opportunity to get build outs completed and people to move in. So small is actually relative to what the building code would require. So when we're looking at 2,500 square feet, it's actually relatively small when you actually have to put the bathrooms and the egress and all those things. So I feel like it's right at the edge of it, but it's hitting kind of that scale.
You can take out about 200 almost 400 square feet just for bathrooms.
Right. And so, you know, if you get into a kind of larger restaurant, it's like 4 bathrooms, you know, we can really take up a lot of space. And kind of the other point of that overlay district that I'm looking at is the minimizing the impact on the adjacent residential streets. And the density here, you know, while we're talking variety of sizes, we've got R4C south and adjacent to it. And so if we can put a substantial amount of units here, relieving some of that demand of units, that we could see a lot more development in the R4C and the character of those old houses. I feel like that's part of the protection of what can we do on this street versus having it trickle into the neighborhoods. Part of this overlay district is to let this district protect those nearby residential streets. So I think it's weighing those pros and cons to figure out what this district can do and has to do versus the other. So, like, I really appreciate Mr. Potts raising this and keeping an eye on this as we see projects going through with this, but there are, you know, a variety of factors within that territory too, to kind of balance them out. So, especially with the kind of small commercial, from my expertise, that's kind of how I see it weighed. So I'm just going to put that out there as my reason for supporting this project as it relates to the overlay district. Questions about the project? There's the additional transformer area if required in the middle of that walkway.
Yeah. So
It's a pretty significant, like, pedestrian space if it doesn't happen, or even if it does happen. So I'm interested, since it's in between 2 more narrow pathways, how that space is designed and what that experience is, especially when it comes to lighting and the overhangs and things.
So I can't give you the exact answer yet because we're still working fully with DTE on exactly what is required. So we have an agreement with the 611 projects to the south of us, so they have their,
Yeah. Transformer yard.
they have their transformer yard, so we get a transformer in there. As it stands right now, we're gonna at least need 2 transformers we know of because the size of the building, fire pump needs 1, the building needs 1. But we're still working with DTE on how many switch cabinets do you need, how does that gotta lay out, you know, because DTE has gone through and completely changed how they service high-rise buildings. And this will probably be one of the first buildings that's underneath their new program of how they feed it. So we don't even fully know that yet. We're still trying to get all of that because you talk to one person, they tell you one thing, you talk to another person, they tell you another thing, and now we think we have everybody that's involved. So once we know exactly those requirements, you know, most likely there will be a transformer there of some form that will be blocked and screened, and just like it is now back over there.
Is this the maximum footprint we'd be looking at that's planned?
Of the transformer?
Yeah,
I think
like-
you're looking at that because based on the clearances that you have to have on all 4 sides in order to service it.
Okay.
So we may not need the gate, I don't know, just because again, that depends on how that gets oriented and how they can get in and everything else. So there's still a lot of that that has to be flushed out a little bit with DTE, so.
Okay. And then I guess because it's still a large kind of pedestrian area in that middle between those 2 aisles, I'd be interested with or without the transformer area. It's still a large footprint for pedestrians to use, if you could tell me. You mentioned a little bit about lighting.
So
and
you're talking about
areas.
how they walk through?
Yeah, like how
what
you
is
walk
that-
through
I
an
gotcha,
experience.
I
So if
gotcha.
people are mingling back there, smoking, dumping garbage,
Yeah.
or making
Well,
out.
it is also a service area, obviously, for the building. It is both for us and for the adjacent. So I'll go with how we see people currently. They really don't care. I mean, to be honest, they'll walk through anywhere they can get a way through, they're gonna walk. So what we're gonna do our best to, because this area actually, so this is all, what part's covered under here? The building footprint comes here, right? So is this?
Yeah, I think all of that's covered. It's by the parking spots. It's
Yeah.
open. Yeah.
Okay, and then that gets opened back?
And this is all,
Okay.
and the second floor actually extends it.
Okay. So, I need to understand it because I've seen so many different plans lately. So obviously, we're gonna look at, you know, lighting. We'll have cameras back here as well from a security standpoint. Like I said, depending on ultimately, once we get through all the mechanical equipment and ventilation and where's a grill and where's not a grill, you know, we'll look at adding art back there like we've done at other locations as well. While people can walk through here, this will primarily be just lighted. The intent is to probably still bring them through this way to the south across this walk as well. The good thing about this area here is there is not a huge amount of traffic. We have 4 cars. Those are primarily meant for building management purposes, so they're not coming and going on a very quick basis. And then Pizza House, it comes in and goes underneath their building, and it's only one way in. So they only come in and then go down, and those are periodically throughout the day. I know when we did our traffic study, it wasn't actually a huge amount of them coming in and going out. So we can work along with their, trying to create directional ways to, pathways to get through that, be it on the walk itself and directing people or creating some avenue. So I don't want to say I have the full answer how that's going to be done, because we have a lot of different ideas and we have to fully vet out where's DT's end of the day, where are they at and everything else, so.
And then lighting, is it utility lighting or is it kind of design feature lighting? Like what's the kind
It'll be more of a design feature lighting.
Okay.
We obviously have to look at what the photometrics are and how many foot candles and everything else, and have that help direct, some of what we have along those pathways. So I would say you're looking at more like a utility LED light along here, just to keep it nice and bright. Along here, I'm trying to remember, do we have bollards? Were we doing lighted bollards?
Yeah, bollards would be my next question.
Yeah,
As
I
a
can't remember, but I
location
don't
to
just-
protect for vehicular
No, we
into
didn't
that
have-
middle
because of
area.
the distance, yeah. We didn't have bollards there, that's correct, because of the distance we had to maintain with the adjacent building and.
For that small sidewalk.
Yeah, for the sidewalk, and then the ingress that was required for the agreement that we have also with the adjacent property owner as well. So those would probably be more decorative, because we do have more options there along that building to create more decorative there, whereas across here, when you only have a short pathway, you're just gonna wanna keep something to light it up, so.
Yeah, and then bollards, because I don't see anything kind of blocking, even past that transformer. I'm thinking, electrics, like motorcycles and things can actually scoot all the way through that right now. I mean, you can get through bollards with a small scooter too.
Yeah,
But,
and
are there any
we'll
of
work
those?
with MCI and figuring out where exactly those have to go, obviously, because, like I said, once we know where DTE's at, what equipment's back there, is there things that we have to further protect as well? How do we maintain that, and how does the building flow as well? Because you have your trash room here for us and it coming out.
For access,
Trying to
yeah.
have a whole lot of bollards here is gonna be a problem, just with city services and things along those lines picking up as well, so.
My next question is the railing for the patios on the 3rd floor. In the renderings, they show all the way across, and how I'm reading the plan is that the balconies aren't, like there's roof overhang labeled and then balconies, and the balcony patio isn't the entire length of that building facade.
Is this the area?
Yep. So on both sides of the entry, those railings run the whole kind of length of that storefront on either side. But when I look at the plan, there's kind of roof over level 2, and then some lines drawn, and patio at level 3.
So actual patios just at the living rooms, but the railing could run all the way across to make it look like it is all a patio, but we didn't want to put patios in front of bedroom.
So how, is the roof finished differently there than the patio area?
Yeah, a roof finish versus a patio, like pedestal.
So to give you an example, so on the north project, so you have multiple units across the front. You may have 3 across the front. So they'll have an area where it's the pedestals, the railings, regular roof. So the pedestals sit up 8-9 inches, but then the roof is down 8-9 inches, and so it's regular roof, so.
I'm just imagining like everybody lined up along the railing
No, not
versus
everybody,
like
no,
at
we
patio.
don't
So
allow that all the way across.
Yeah, okay.
We specifically
have those patios.
have those patios, and they're not like,
Okay, I just wanted to clarify when I'm looking at elevation versus plan and make sure that those are in sync.
We did not want people walking in front of bedroom windows.
I think my last one got answered, which was what was the intended use in the overhang area for that retail? Is that's for that retail?
Yeah.
And you're trying to block that off? I would kind of reinforce Commissioner Briggs's comments about the design, and that, I mean, we've seen it at the corner of Main and Huron, the same kind of columns and setback for an entrance, and it does something. I don't think it's the successful statement of a piece that's been kind of said here. And so I think there's definitely, I would request some more.
So I have a question, and this is the confusing part that we have. Obviously,
Yeah.
we have to go through the design review process.
Yep.
And so that process is mainly focused on the design aspects of the building. And so now we come back and now there are additional design changes that are wanted. I'm just trying to understand that process because, you know,
I don't think these are changes
No.
that we have any control over.
Okay,
This is
I'm just
a
trying to
really-
understand because I'm like, do we have to go back to design review?
No.
This is a really strong suggestion.
Yes.
Gotcha.
We might talk about brown brick later, but
And we will.
I'll leave that. But yeah, even in terms of, the art in the alleys and kind of what happens here as a statement, I think moving it forward, we want this to be a successful project. When we talk about character overlay districts, you want it to be a successful
So
project.
here's a question.
Yeah.
Do you have suggestions? Because we asked the design review board and they don't really give us a lot of suggestions. And so that's the challenging part that we have. We hear something, we take that back, we've applied it the best that we think it applied. We come now and you're like, well, we think you can do more. So do you have any suggestions? Because,
Yeah.
you know, I don't want us to go back to the drawing board and then come back and the council sees something and they're like, wait a second, you know, so.
I mean, it's hard to make design recommendations on the fly for this thing.
Even if you want to email us. you
But
can email
yeah,
us.
I think there's it also feels like a couple of pieces that were, solving the column and then plugging light in, right? They're objects placed instead of considered in context of its facade and the rest of the kind of ground floor and what it's working with. So I think that I think is what I'm more reacting to, is they feel like components instead of kind of integrated design to the facade and how
Okay.
it works as a statement. And these are more just kind of preferences at this point, but not requirements or recommendations to move forward. So those I think are my main concerns at this point. Thank you.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think most of what I had has been covered. I think ultimately I appreciate that this is coming forward, utilizing the affordable housing premium that we have on the books. It's been a decade and it's nice to see something move forward. It's my hopes that new premium reforms will go through City Council, and this may be the first and the last, or the first and the penultimate, to utilize this version. But who knows? I also see the need for increased density in the near campus area. In the last 15 years, the university has increased its enrollment by 10,000, and with private development and the construction of new dorms, we still see a significant shortage of bedrooms just to the net increase of students, which is shocking at the rate of development we've seen. But that's just the nature of a growing university that does not quit. And we need to house these students, and if we don't house them near campus, they're going to be chewing up single-family homes, which, as I hear from residents, isn't desired either. And so I think this is best. I appreciate that it's mixed use. I appreciate that there are retail opportunities. I will also add my comments about the corner. I think this is going to be the commercial entrance to the city. I think across the street you still have the historic Espresso Royale that adds a little bit more character and differentiation to that corner. Other than the School of Social Work, right, you have like kind of a historic, you have Law Quad, you have the dorm, I'm blanking on its name. Is that Martha Cook? And then West Hall, the iconic old engineering building. And I think what West Hall does really well is it's a redder brick. It also has a lot of curved archways with square windows, so you have a lot of right angles here. I mean, it's entirely right angles, and seeing something break that up might be interesting. And I think it also could create a really great opportunity for that retail stall at the corner for something kind of flagship and iconic, something for your commercial real estate broker to really work with, and do something significant and meaningful as people experience Ann Arbor for the first time matriculating in. I'll also say that West Hall, has the really red brick. It has the cast stone, and it also has the really aged copper. And I think all of those probably offer some kind of context that you could reference in your architecture, something that would really try to draw those two sides of the corner together in an interesting way. I'll say too, Mr. Hughes, Sean, you guys are the closest thing we have to local developers when it comes to student housing downtown, and if someone's going to take a risk on architecture, I think it can be you guys.
I'm still trying to get Bill Kinley his clock that he wants.
I think if everyone says it's subjective and we're nervous, we're going to get a lot of right angles, we're going to get a lot of brown buildings, and I think there's some opportunity to take small risks to do something much more interesting in reference to West Hall. So I'll leave it there.
I appreciate the comments. I think that helps give us a little bit more, because again, when design review, we kind of try to ask some questions of, okay, well, what do you want us to see? And it was like, well, kind of like, okay, we're still not sure, but okay.
Commissioner Mills.
I don't totally know what the comment about the clock was, but honestly, in my mind, a clock would be better than the V. In terms of a landmark, the V is underwhelming. It does nothing for me, personally, bluntly. But I also like everything that Commissioner Ackerman just said. That would be awesome. The other things that I have are somewhat covered, but mostly on that first floor again. The staff report talks about 2 to 4 retail spaces. I see 3 to 5. So I just want to make sure that we're understanding. It is 3 to 5? Yes. Okay, great.
Matt forgot his calculator that day.
What numbers before?
Forgot the E off to the side. That's what I kind of assumed.
Yes.
Because you do have this experience, I want you to talk to me a little bit about how often bike rooms are used.
It varies. Right now, nobody's really used any of it at North. I don't know if that's just because we've been wrapping things up and people don't want to put their bikes in there just yet. With Landmark, it's hard to say because we actually sold that building 2 weeks after we had finished it. So I'm not quite sure how much that bike room is actually utilized there. So I can't actually say. I think it's hit or miss. You have people nowadays that use Lyft, and now with the invent of the spin scooters that everybody drives on the sidewalks that they're not supposed to, you see a lot of that going back and forth. With where we're located at as well, a lot of people are just walking to their classes because of the proximity that we do have. So it is hard to say because you are seeing a lot of that changing more and more with the demographic of the students that are actually in nowadays. So I unfortunately don't have a full answer to be able to give you how much is utilized and how much is not. So.
Got it. I don't know. That's like if I have time sometime, I'm going to go around and figure out what those look like. I
would appreciate it. It would help me know.
Well, no. So I want it there. I'm not going to I appreciate that you have a space. Given the previous conversation, I now kind of have a better sense of what's covered in the back, how open it is, and what's not. I was really afraid that it was very narrow. I'm still a little bit nervous, particularly about that 5 foot wide section on the west side. If I'm coming in with a bike, I don't know how long that stretch is. I mean, getting through with a bike. If it were me, right, I would probably use the bike or the vehicle lane that you have on the east side to get out because it's just more open.
Oh, on the other side. Well, that and the bike
side.
rooms are kind of split right now too.
Yeah.
So that could get tweaked obviously as we talk with DTE more too. So if they're more on one side or the other, that'll help.
I mean, one of the things that just strikes me, again, this is not in our code anywhere, but how easy it is if you park a car to get into the building, to your, apartment, versus how easy it is if you park a bike to get in, which is not. Like, how many doorways do you have to go through to get to an elevator or a stairway? A lot, right? And so that's not facilitating. That's not, again, this is not something that our code requires, but my guess is that if they're underutilized, this may be one of the reasons. I think it is much more open than, at least on the plan, I anticipated, so but I'm still I'm worried that it's not gonna get utilized, and then people are gonna say, see, we don't need bicycle infrastructure, when in fact, it's just because, you have to go outside and through multiple doors and walk around, and so, yeah.
I think I could agree if this was more of a market rate apartment complex in downtown, but with students, they're a totally different beast. Totally different beast.
Well, this is exactly why I think instead, getting to the very earlier comments, you're gonna have a whole bunch, you just said it yourself, chained to trees on the front, right? And that's not what we wanna see.
If I could put more bike routes, I'd be happy about that.
So, yeah, it meets our code. I appreciate that it's there. I appreciate that you're going above and beyond. I wish it were better integrated, that just like there is a direct access from that parking garage into the unit, you have to go outside this way, right? And so I wish that we're here, but I think it's more of us kind of food for thought, and maybe food for the next time we have buildings come before us. But overall, I think what other people said, this is the right place for density. This does take pressure off of some of the nearer neighborhoods there. I think that I'm confident that the corner can be improved and that you guys have some maybe ideas now. I'm happy that there are 3 to 5 retail spaces, because I think the more kind of diversity that we have, the better. But I appreciate somebody who designs these places tampering our expectations in that regard. So, thanks.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I think most of what I was going to ask was addressed as well, except I'm going to be a broken record about this alley. I have this thing for alleys. I love them. I think that they're public space that can be utilized if done, in a way that makes sense design-wise. I think that transformer box or transponder thing does kind of get in the way, but I'm just trying to think of what could be done, because it's kind of a weird space. I can't actually visualize what the experience would be like going through this. I just worry that people will feel kind of unsafe, and obviously the garbage room is back there. So I wish I sort of had a better picture of what the section would look like through that alleyway. But I was just thinking of things you could put in there, and these are just suggestions, but in terms of some sort of seating back there, primarily in this area that comes out of the building that's right behind the parking ramp area, or this is kind of crazy, but maybe even some sort of water feature. I mean, it's a lot of space back there, and I think there's not really any other open space that this building can use. So, I like the artwork idea. When you look at the south elevation, it's just all walls, so they just scream to me like something could be done there. And then I'm just thinking of I'm actually thinking specifically of Belts Alley in Detroit, but overhead string lights can kind of make the experience feel like something that you want to walk into. I mean, I think on the east side, it's right across the street from Rick's maybe, and some other restaurant retail. So people might actually be accessing it that way and just making it feel like this is an entrance and not some scary back of a building, I think would help. Something Commissioner Mills was just saying made me look at the bike storage room a little bit more. So you can only go in and out one way. There's no entrance from the bike storage room into the building. You have to go back outside. Am I looking at this right? Okay. I also don't love that. I kind of agree with you that why would people do that? Yeah, but you still have to go back outside. And then just one other thing, when you, 'cause obviously you can access the building from the corridor, so like if you live there, going in there, that's a good benefit, but these just look like, you know, very long passageways back to a door where you can get to stairs. Like I might encourage some sort of like murals or something on those walls too, or just to make it, again, like you're just sort of walking down like this very long hallway, make it a nicer experience for people that might be accessing it from the alley. If that makes sense.
Are you talking interior or exterior?
Interior. I would point and show you if I could.
Yeah, the one caveat there is that these are a lot of times used by service corridors, and they will get beat completely up. So I put a mural up, it's gonna get destroyed.
Okay, maybe just bright paint then.
You can do bright paint, but
Bright paint.
I'm gonna be painting it a lot. Trust me, based on experience.
Mural on the ceiling.
Yeah, mural on the ceiling, clouds, like when you're at the dentist office.
I don't have any data to back this up, but I feel like if it's a space that feels more like a space and less like a service corridor, people might actually treat it better if it looks like something. I mean, totally up to you. Might be worth piloting. But
It
they
would really be a pilot. I'll tell you.
I forget what students are like, I guess. I think that's all I have.
Commissioner Woods.
Just a couple questions that I wondered. One is, will each of the bedroom units then have a window?
Yeah, they're required by code to have a window.
Good. There were times when we weren't so sure that was happening, so I just wanted to double check.
That's a building, is that
Yeah,
a
no.
building code as well?
It's in our zoning code, I know that.
Yeah, it's in
Okay.
zoning, and I think it's in building now too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think building requires it as well.
All right, good. And then, are you doing anything green with this building? Have I missed it? Like a green roof, anything?
No, we're not. No, we're not doing green.
Missed opportunity, I guess. Or,
I can't commit to.
so
doing
what's on the top of the roof? Just the mechanics and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
mechanical.
Okay. It would, it would be nice to have something green up there. Thank you for the affordable housing. We appreciate that. But we also like green things too. And did you indicate that the landscaping is all going to be a part of whatever the DDA is doing in that area?
Yeah, so I forgot what all parks require, but yeah, primarily everything is what the DDA has requested as part of the streetscapes or what we had to do on Church, East U and Church.
And I can just add, it's on the site plan as well, like on detailed sheets, and as well as in the
Okay.
development agreement, and they've worked it out with the DDA in advance to restore it
engineering and everybody,
exactly as
parks.
in kind as what's there, so.
Okay.
I
yes.
think there's been about 5 different departments that have talked to us
Yes,
about that,
there's-
so.
It's covered.
Okay, all right, good. Okay.
Commissioner Abrams.
I'll just make a couple brief comments. I think we were kind of like kindly requested to provide some explanation for the way in which we were going to vote. So I was going to take that request seriously. And I think this project is a good example of one where I feel that I have to vote in favor of the petition because it meets all of the requirements, but I think that all of the comments are evidence that the requirements are substandard, right? So that a project can meet those requirements and yet I think leave us kind of wanting for so much more. And maybe just to offer one more perspective on why maybe the design feels like it could be better.
Are we talking specifically the corner?
I'm talking about the whole thing, I guess, at this point, which is
Okay.
just to say, I understand that from a development perspective, there's no incentive to take a risk. And so I think what we see before us is something which is kind of nice within the standards of what's known and familiar and proven to work. But maybe one way that we could think about that is that you could kind of pick this building up and probably place it anywhere, and it would change very, very little, which is to say that there's nothing that's been particularly considered in its design that is, I think, caring for the character of its site and its location. But I'm kind of shocked, so I'm kind of new to the planning commission, so to a certain extent, it's interesting for me to observe the way in which the project can kind of meet all of its legal requirements and still have so many things that we all wish it could have, that we can only offer merely as suggestions or preferences. But I'm surprised that the character overlay requirement for the offset above the street wall is 5 feet, right? So the character overlay is supposed to maintain this kind of two-story, the kind of vibe of a 2- and 3-story streetscape. And the way it does that is by having this offset, but the offset is only 5 feet. So in effect, you get a building that feels like it's 13 stories high, not 2 stories high. So I don't know, maybe at some point the character overlay should be revisited. So, and then maybe just as one last thing, in regards to alleys, there's just, if you're interested, there's a project in Nashville that was completed maybe only a year ago by a small architecture practice called Sports. The last letter is a Z, I think, not an S. So Sports with a Z. But they did an alley, kind of alley revitalization project in Nashville. It's really nice. That might just be worth checking out. That involves just bright green seating. Thanks.
All right, I have a list of questions, and then we'll head back to some other commissioners. So affordable housing, where's the affordable housing going to be located in the building?
Have we set those yet?
I think we're still discussing which units would be the affordable units. But it was discussed with the county at one point that they would like that dispersed throughout the building and not just all on one floor. And that the residents of the affordable housing would, of course, have access to the same amenities and, although it wasn't mentioned, the same building entrance, because I guess in some communities that is not the case. So 14 units, and it has not been determined which units yet.
I would encourage that they be dispersed throughout the building, not just one floor, not just one style of a unit, but dispersed all throughout the building. And I guess the next question is, how big are those units going to be?
A minimum of 600 square feet, maybe 625, it's hard to say exactly.
That's in the, it requires a minimum of
600 square feet.
Very good. Then in regards to, so let's talk about parking. So we're seeing many projects in the downtown area going to the city's and the DDA's parking structures to get additional permits. And I guess this is more a question for staff. Then we hear the DDA at the last with the Ann Street parking structure saying we're out of space. So how are they going to get 41 spaces when I know that the DDA in some parking structures currently has a multi-year waiting list?
So I can answer that
Yeah,
question
you
for
will
you?
answer that
I can
better
better
than
than
I
I can.
kind of
So,
that
so
meeting.
based upon North, there are no parking spaces left in forest structure. We're not gonna be able to go and get more parking. We may be able to maybe get evening passes, which is one of the things we did on North. But primarily we'll be using the contribution in lieu aspect of it, so.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What's the contribution in there?
So
How
Matt,
much
is
that is?
it, what is it now, do you know?
I don't forget what the amount is.
I wanna say it's like 50 something like that, I think.
Probably my development agreement.
Is it a per spot?
It's a per
Yes, it's a
spot,
per
yeah, it's
spot.
per space. I wanna say it's like around 55, I think.
Yeah, I don't
Somewhere in
remember
there, it's a
offhand. It may be
55
right.
contribution to the parking system. I believe it's to the DDA and to gets,
Yes,
puts into the parking
It is,
system.
correct.
It would be great to know that number, not that this will affect in any way that I vote there, but.
Yeah,
just so know.
yeah, I
can work
can't
on
remember
getting
off
that
the top. I
information
wanna
to
say
us.
it's like 55, I think is what it is, but I could be wrong, so.
And I've asked you this question before, and anytime anybody comes with a campus project to us, I ask this question, and that is the supply-demand. You know, I'm sure you've crunched your numbers before you've started this process, but can you talk to us a little bit more about the supply and demand and what you're seeing, and like what's happening at the north, and what your expectations are for the south?
We're fully leased up at North. I believe we may have 1 or 2 beds available, but it's not because of people not coming in, it's just because of, we don't have any male beds left, we have female beds left, and so we've had quite a bit of people who've actually come in this week, still looking for spaces for the upcoming year. So you're still seeing the demand out there. Obviously, as you well know, location is everything. Vic North, Vic South, I believe by far have the best locations of anywhere in downtown in regards to their
That's what all the developers say, but go ahead.
well, yes, but in regards to proximity of actual to campus, I think those two have it. So one of the reasons why we changed to 1, 2, 3s, and 4s is we see that demand still highly out there for those types of units. The 5s and 6s, we were able to lease. We didn't have any problems with those, but you still see the high demand for 1, 2, 3s, and 4s. And so that's why these units are 1, 2, 3s, and 4s, to make those more marketable in the market of what we're seeing still out there. So, you know, as Councilman Ackerman had noted as well, you know, the university's still adding students, but they're not adding a whole lot of beds. So there is still a great deal of demand that is out there, believe still in the downtown area.
And then what's next for you guys, since you own another block or two?
Right now, I was worried about getting north completed, and now working on south, and then I'll worry about what's else out there. But we are doing, so we own the building where China Gate Restaurant that used to be at, so that is going through, like we said, moving Oasis. We're doing a facade renovation to that building as well, for the tenants that are there. The next one after we get done with this would be to move to the east site, which is where Middle Earth used to be at. What we plan to do on that, we don't fully have that fully vetted out, obviously, because, you know, got to see where the market's at, what's demand is there as well, so.
Great. And then, so the other piece, just to, you know, I haven't driven on South U in so long because it's been under construction since probably for years now at this point.
And it probably will be for some more years.
Can you talk a little bit about construction timelines, since I think this is the first time in a long time that there hasn't been construction on South U?
Yeah, so overall, we're finishing right now, we're just in overall where South U is at, so we're finishing up that north streetscape work there right now. So I believe we have to be completed by the end of next week, in conversations with city engineering and everything. So by the end of next week, we should have all of that in there. DDA may still have some of the work they have to do, like coming in and doing the plantings and things along those lines that they have to do. This project, we probably would be breaking ground sometime in the springtime, where we would be doing more out in the street again as we would. We'll obviously fence it off as we do demolition and some of the excavation and everything too. And we're working through those with logistics of how do you logistically get in when you're demoing and excavating 2 stories down roughly, of how do you get that out of the site as well. So we're still working through all those requirements. So so that's where this is looking at, and I believe the completion date would be in 2022.
Okay. And then in regards to design, so I challenge you, maybe it's not this project, maybe it's the next one, brown brick.
Brown brick?
I talk about this all the time. The city's turning brown. And it's every project that we're seeing, different tones of it.
Mm-hmm.
And South U has a lot of character that's going away, you know, funky character, and it's becoming this block. So I really challenge you and your architects down the road to come up with something that's unique, that's maybe not all brown. I appreciate that this project has more glass and that you're introducing more glass to it. But I think we need to strive to do a little bit better in the city. Obviously, nothing that we have control over, but something that you guys are as close to local developers as it gets. So I ask that you try that for your next project. Just as, you know, at this point, it might be too late, but for me, you know, just that corner across the street from the diag, just removing that column is, yeah, I don't know if it's feasible. I'm not an architect.
It's a structural column.
I'm sure there's a way. I'm sure, but I'm not an architect, so I can't. It is what it is. But that would be the only thing that I would add to, or the thing that I would subtract in order for it to be more attractive, in my opinion. And with that, I will head to Commissioner Briggs.
The one thing that didn't get brought up, there's a lot of discussion of lighting, especially in the alleyway. One thing that you may or may not be aware of is that we're working on updating our lighting ordinance, and while it's not in there yet about dark skies compliant, if you could make every attempt to be cognizant of light pollution.
Yeah, we're not going to be repeating some of the stuff on North where we have uplights and everything else. So yeah, we'll be looking at that and the impact of how that ordinance is flushing out, and how does that imply down in these areas as well, so.
Okay. And then the other thing that just got brought up, I think I understood what you were saying, but I guess it did raise a question for me. The feedback that you had gotten from the county in terms of affordable housing was, you know, making sure that it was dispersed through the building and not a separate entrance. I assume that you were saying that is what is going to happen in this building as well. Not that that was still up for debate.
Correct, yeah, you can in Michigan do segregated. My understanding is
Okay,
you can't do segregated, and we wouldn't be doing segregated anyway,
Okay, I
so-
wasn't sure.
As you can
All
see,
of a
we only
sudden I
have
thought,
one
is that an
entrance into
option?
this building, so.
Okay, just want to make sure, great.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. And one of your questions about parking also has me wondering, you have noted that you'll, be able to provide the 71 spaces here underground, but then there'll be this payment in lieu for the balance. How do your tenants feel about that? Like, do they want to bring cars and don't have them? Can you share with us your experience?
With North, you saw some people that just said, well, I'm not gonna rent there because I don't have a car. You saw some people that are like, yeah, I'm fine with the evening passes. There are other locations within the area where they were able to find parking if they really, really wanted parking. But overall, we haven't seen it being too much of a detriment of not having a car for every person or whatnot. And you don't typically see that anyways. I know with like Landmark, even though we had sold that from talking with management there that we had kept in contact with, even their parking structure wasn't fully utilized 100% with cars with the spaces that they had down there as well. I know when you look at, I know it's not a student housing, but when you look at the one that it's on First and the one that, yes, is it City
Ann Arbor
Place?
City Apartments.
City Place, I think. The one that's
Oh, on Fourth?
yes, down there. The one
The one that has
public underneath it that they did with the DDA.
Ann Arbor City Apartments.
So, yeah, City Club. From what we heard, they don't even use all the parking spaces that they have for their residents too. So you are seeing this shift, obviously, again, with the invent of Uber and Lyft and downtown and everything. You're seeing that change. So we haven't really seen it be, obviously, as we're fully leased up, we haven't seen it as an issue.
So knowing that the difference between, well, I guess the 41 spots that you will have to enter an agreement with the DDA for, which won't be provided there, right? If there's no space left in the structure, it won't be provided there. You don't believe that this is hindering your ability to rent out this place? Okay.
No.
I think that's helpful to kind of put it into context about how much parking in these, very close to campus areas we actually need.
Now, let me say though, however, that is different than the parking in general for people coming and visiting in the downtown area. Two totally different things, but from a residential standpoint, we're not seeing it as a detriment. Now, as somebody who has been on the South Univers Area Association and served as a president, totally different viewpoint of, yes, there needs to be more parking within the downtown area for people to come and visit. I mean, I've been down here and even on the Maynard Street and coming down to a concert, and thankfully I have a parking space at a building that we have because the parking structure is full. So two totally different issues, but yes.
Is that factored into at all the retail space that you're doing there? Like the parking effectively, does that come up? Like,
some of the retail tenants, yes. We've been able to work with them through options, but overall, it hasn't been too much of a detriment with the people that are coming into the building that we've seen so far.
got it. Thanks for sharing that.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kowalski, as a matter of process, if we were to, if we were to vote this forward tonight, but with the expectation that petitioner work with staff on some kind of streetscape elevation changes, is that something that would need to come back to planning commission before moving to council? Would you recommend that it do?
I wouldn't necessarily, because it would be highly subjective at that point for staff to make that determination that this meets your, what you guys are kind of going, and we've heard a bunch of different, I wouldn't necessarily feel more comfortable as staff going by and saying, well, this addresses, I've heard your conversations here. But I think ultimately when it gets to city council, they can make changes without it coming back to this board. There's no question about that. They can make some of these changes or make modifications. Staff obviously will look at it and make sure it still complies with the street standards and all that kind of stuff, but it would be kind of more of a judgment call at that point, whether or not we think this addresses, for some, remove the column, leave the column, water, it's gonna be a really difficult call.
So
It's not an exact
So you recommend that it come back to planning commission?
Well, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying, if the design is that important, then, I mean, you might wanna have the design flushed out before it moves forward. So
Okay.
I'm saying, if otherwise staff,
Sure.
they can certainly make those changes, and we can look at that and make a determination
All right.
on that. But I wouldn't wanna speak for the whole of the commission.
Yeah,
I'm
certainly.
saying whether this addresses your changes.
Certainly, okay. Well, thank you for that.
But by code, it wouldn't be required to come back here,
Okay,
unless you postpone it, I guess.
understood. So I guess I'll defer to colleagues simply because either way, I'll get to see it again. So it really, I defer to you all and your judgment.
One other comment too, because they just mentioned it, the DRB actually made a comment about having that column there too. So again, that's the issue that I think.
With that being a tenant space, they're worried about a big Starbucks logo as the first thing you see when you come out of the diag. So they wanted us to put a permanent building feature there that you would focus on rather than the tenant space that's right there.
You can actually verify that was at the DRB meeting, and that was a decision point back and forth about putting something there or removing something to open up that space. It's correct.
I'm sure Starbucks would pay a lot of money for that.
We'll make it a Starbucks clock.
Now you're talking. Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Just one more thing, something you said in the discussion about the disbursement of the affordable housing use made me think of this. Soundproofing, like sound mitigation in between the units. I mean, I don't know if people that are on the waiting list for affordable units would opt out of, can they opt out? Probably, right? Like, I don't know that I want to live in a building full of students, but that just made me think, like, what kind of things are you doing in the building in terms of like not being able to hear loud music coming from the person next door, or like
Well, that's that comes to somewhat of a management, but obviously between units, you have sound bat insulation that goes between the walls, and those aspects there. So far, we haven't heard any issues between a unit and a unit with anything. But if somebody's playing loud music, that becomes a management issue. So if we actually were talking with a tenant who was below a unit that's being considered the party unit now that we're finding. And she's like, yeah, we can hear them if they drop something or everything. And there was a little bit, they were getting a little bit loud, but they told management, and, management was able to handle it. So you can only do so much to sound dampen it, but there's still gonna be noise no matter what. And that becomes now to a management, that if there is a noise nuisance, that is handled by management, and that is usually a part of the lease documents as well.
But you're doing everything you can do in terms of sound.
Correct, yeah, and
management.
we look at that in general, just because you don't want to have a noisy building.
Yeah.
I mean, those are some of the lessons that we learned from when we did Landmark, and some of the things that we've done differently too, so.
Oh, great. I've lived in places where I feel like there's like cardboard in between the walls, so.
Yeah, no, we put specifically sound bat between the demising walls and the corridor walls and everything too, so.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Briggs.
I'm not sure I feel comfortable suggesting postponing for it to come back to us, though. I think I understand that it's difficult to take this feedback around design. I think you've heard it over and over again, though, from different bodies. And so, and the next body you go to is the one that seems to have the most interest in neighborhood character in the community right now. So I think it's maybe worth your time to really think about how this interfaces. And I thought the recommendations that Councilmember Ackerman gave were at least very much in line with things that I thought made a lot of sense and character to draw upon, and things you could say that you were drawing upon. So those are my thoughts on that question.
And those are very helpful comments that we can take back and implement, so.
My feeling is that we move forward on this evening. This is out of our purview at this point, so I don't see a reason to stop. Any further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is audience participation. This is the opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the Planning Commission. You'll have up to 3 minutes to speak on any subject you would like. If If you'd like to address the Planning Commission, please step forward. State your name and address for the record.
Well, Ethel Potts again. I should have said when you were dealing with the Hideaway Lane, that when it had been before commission before, when it was an issue in the past, the biggest single problem was the waterway. There was great difficulty keeping it having it under control, dealing with it, dealing with runoff, everything that would relate to an open waterway needs to be looked at again. Is it in better shape, in worse shape? What are the plans? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be real brief. I represent Ken Bryant, who's the owner of Medicine Man Ann Arbor, which is a medical marijuana provisioning center here in Ann Arbor. It's state licensed. Maybe somebody could answer this question for me after the meeting, because I'm just kind of getting involved with the local codes and things. So for the SEUs, I'm understanding that there's going to be 28 issued for medical marijuana provisioning centers. Ken currently has one of those, but he's got problems with the landlord, so he's being forced to relocate, and he is next in the queue. But I've gone through online and found a couple of them that, they were applied for years ago and nothing has been done on these. I'm wondering at what point do some of these, either get denied or somebody else gets a chance to, come to the table. What is the process on that? How long do they get? Is it a state licensing issue, like they're waiting for the state licenses? I'm not really sure that I would agree that that would be fair. I mean, Ken has got a place licensed, he's ready to go. I feel like, something in terms of getting these either approved or denied, they shouldn't be taking years is all pretty much what I'm saying. So if maybe somebody could shed some clarification on that for me, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'm sure Mr. Kowalski will be happy to address that shortly after the meeting. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Seeing no one, moving on to commission proposed business. The only thing I would just like to discuss very briefly, and I don't think this is in our purview, is the Lyft and Uber situation that we have in the city. I have now seen many cities no longer allow pickups and drop-offs on major roadways like main streets and some very busy roads. So I would ask that Commissioner Ackerman maybe take this back to council or whichever commission is responsible for this. But that might be something to think about for South University, Huron, Main Street, some of our major roads. So, Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, just to add to that, I thought the comment around Amazon was actually also really useful. I can't imagine how many Amazon deliveries they get every single day, and that has got to be, it's something we need to plan for in the downtown.
You probably couldn't see it on your floor, but actually on their floor plans, they have Amazon drop boxes, or if you could see it on their floor plans, they have large areas set aside specifically for Amazon, which is something we wouldn't have thought of, obviously, a couple.
But just those vans coming up, and now that they're, independent delivery vehicles too, and there's been some question. Anyway, there's a whole lot there. The second thing that I feel like we spend just a ton of time on, probably unnecessarily so repetitively, is bike parking in the downtown ABC. And I think that if there's a way for maybe Transportation Commission to take a look at those requirements, or some sort of interface between planning and transportation, to take a look and see if those sort of our requirements are in line with our needs. I think we talk about it quite a bit.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to give a quick plug to make sure that the Ordinance Revisions Committee is focusing on and maybe pushing staff a little bit around short-term rental regulation. This is something that has a big impact on neighborhoods, on community building, and on affordability. We're seeing a lot of homes being purchased up and essentially turned into hotels, which really runs counter to a lot of both the best practices and the philosophies and our conversations around the supply of housing for people who live here. And so it's something that's on the work plan, but just wanted to give a plug for that to keep the momentum up. It's a council directive. So I promised a colleague I would give that plug, but it's from me as well.
Commissioner Ackerman, is this your last meeting? Do we know for sure?
I don't
or-
believe so.
Okay.
So I will actually be out of town at the next meeting for work, and I'm going to send a reminder out to the group. But I also don't know the mayor's calendar for nominating your replacement. And that'd be a month-long process alone.
And bylaws state that he can continue serving until a replacement
Okay.
is founded, but I have, outside of that,
So we will see
I
you
wouldn't
next
know.
week and the week after that, and maybe a week after that. And a week
Yes.
after that. All right, any further commission proposed business? Commissioner Briggs?
Since we don't know the timeline, and you said you're definitely not going to be here on the next meeting, I just wanted to thank you for your service on the commission. It has been outstanding, and I feel like I have learned something from you at every single meeting, and I appreciate the thoroughness that you come to this meeting. One, reporting back to us about what's happening at City Council, but also really thoughtfully looking at the projects in front of us. And despite concerns of some, I think you've done it in a particularly unbiased way, where you've tried to be very responsive to all of the questions and make sure that they got answered in a meeting. So thank you so much for all the effort that you've put in here.
Is this really it?
It would be a month-long process to get someone else seated, so I trust that I'll be back for another planning commission meeting, so you can save your sob stories for another time.
about celebrations maybe.
No.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Carried away.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Hammerschmidt, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. We are adjourned. Thank you.